In a quiet coffee shop, Sarah and Jake, both biology students, are sitting at a table with their textbooks and their laptops open. Sarah says, did you get through this week's reading assignment on scientific inquiry? Jake, yeah, I finished it last night. It was pretty interesting. Actually, I think I have a better grasp on what science can and can't do now. Sarah responds, same here. I was surprised by how important it is to define what kinds of questions can even be answered scientifically. I never really thought about the difference before. Jake, right. Like, science can only deal with stuff that's measurable and observable. I mean, you can't use science to answer something like, for example, what's the meaning of life? That's more of a physiological question, not a scientific one. Sarah, exactly, but that's something like, what's the effect of increased carbon dioxide on plant growth? Is perfect for scientific investigation. It's testable and it's measurable. Jake, and then there's the hypothesis part. I always thought a hypothesis was a random guess, but the reading really cleared it up for me. It's not just a guess. It has to be specific and testable. Sarah, yeah, that part stood out to me too. A good hypothesis has to be falsifiable, meaning you can prove it wrong. I didn't really get that before. If a hypothesis can't be proven wrong, it's not scientifically useful. Jake, right. It makes total sense now. It's like you can test it, you can know whether your hypothesis is accurate or not. I like the example about the plants and sunlight. If you say more sunlight will make plants grow more taller, then it's testable, right? But if you said something vague like, sunlight helps plants thrive in ways we can't measure, I don't know, who knows, you really can't design an experiment around that. Sarah, speaking of experience, designing one is a lot more complicated than I thought. I mean, you have to think about all these different variables, independent, dependent, control variables. It's like building a really precise puzzle. Jake, yeah, and if you don't control all the variables properly, your results could be a mess. Like in a plant experiment, you can't just change the sunlight and ignore other things like water or soil. They have to be the same across all your groups. Sarah, that's where the control group comes in, right? You need a baseline to compare your results to. Otherwise, you don't know if the changes you see are actually from the sunlight or from some other factor. Jake, exactly. And then once you have the results, it's all about how you present them. That part about using tables and graph, yeah, that made a lot of sense to me. Like, why struggle to explain raw data when you can just put it in a bar graph or a line chart, right? Sarah, yeah, graphing really helps make things clearer. They show patterns that might not jump out when you're just staring at a bunch of numbers in a table. I'm always surprised how different the data can look once it's visualized. Jake, for sure. And in the past, critiquing the experiment, I didn't realize how important that was. It's not just about getting the results, but asking, did we do everything right? What could have gone wrong? Sarah, exactly. Even if your hypothesis is supported, you still have to think about whether there are any errors. Maybe your sample size was too small, or you didn't control for something you should have. There's always room to improve the experiment. Jake, yeah, and that's how science progresses, right? It's never really done. Even when you think if you have a solid answer, someone else can come along with a better experiment or new technology that totally revives what we thought was true. Sarah, yeah, I like that about science. It's always evolving, always building on what came before, new data, new techniques, and even new questions pop up as we go. It keeps everything moving forward. Jake, it's also why communicating results clearly is so important. The discussions and conclusions aren't just for yourself, but for the entire scientific community. If others can understand and replicate your work, they could build upon it, right? Sarah, definitely. I think a lot of people understand how much science is about communication, whether it's writing reports, making graphs, or presenting at conferences. The ability to explain your findings is just as important as doing the experiment itself. Jake, yeah, it's all about making sure that information is out there for others to use. I guess that's why peer review is such a big deal in science. Sarah, yeah, totally right, man. Well, it sounds like we're both getting the hang of the scientific method stuff. I think now I can design a solid experiment and actually critique it instead of just collecting data and calling it a day. Jake, same here. We're definitely building a good foundation for the rest of the semester. It'll be interesting to see how this fits together into biology later on. Sarah, I agree. Well, let's hope we get some hands-on practice soon. I think designing an experiment and interpreting real data is really what makes it all click. Jake, definitely. All right, back to the books for me. For now, that's just the beginning. Oh, yeah, and by the way, Sarah, you do anything Saturday night? Anyway.